Good morning, good evening, and good night. Welcome to the SB Nation NFL show. More specifically, it's Monday Football Monday. Reminder, you can watch us live here on YouTube. Just search the SB Nation NFL show, Monday Football Monday. Follow us on all the podcasting platforms where you get podcasts. And also a reminder that this show is brought to you by DraftKings. DraftKings Sportsbook is an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app today and use code SBNFL for a special offer when you sign up. That's SBNFL only at DraftKings Sportsbook. Obviously, I am not RJ Ochoa. I am filling in for the very irreplaceable RJ Ochoa. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I am the producer at Pride of Detroit. With me, as always, on the ones and twos behind the scenes is also the irreplaceable and well-respected and maybe I would say the most reliable part of our team, Rachel Prevet, on the ones and twos. And to help me, because it is not a one-person job to fill RJ's shoes, and for that matter, Pete Sweeney as well. We've brought in a familiar face, not to me personally, but for all of you that are very familiar with the Monday Football Monday show. Excuse me. He is, of course, one of our favorite contributors over at the Bolts from the Blue podcast blog over there, covering our wonderful Los Angeles Chargers. Michael Peterson is here. Michael, thanks for filling in, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I always love listening to RJ's introductions, and at first I was like, "Are we going to get the long-winded, full of compliments, jokes, that type of intro today?" And I think you did a phenomenal job. I almost thought it was RJ over there in the seat as well. So
I'll try not to take that as an insult.
No, not at all. No. I think that's the highest of compliments. But glad to be here. I know it's been a little bit since I've been on, but it's like riding a bike. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're kind of in the swing of things here. It's July 17th, Monday, of course, and training camp. It's training camp week. We're all kind of getting back into business. Plenty to talk about this week. Some news dropped over the weekend. We'll talk a little bit about favorites to go first to worst, and talk a little franchise tag as well. But before we get into anything, Michael, I know everyone loves icebreakers. You and I haven't, I think, officially met before. We've kind of crossed paths here and there. So, so before we get into anything, I have two questions for you.
Okay.
One, what is the best thing you did over your summer quote unquote break? And two, what's the Baker Mayfield joke? I want in on it.
I think I'll do the Baker Mayfield joke first because I maybe have to think about what I've done this summer. But there's honestly nothing really to it besides one day, or it was probably the first time I ever was on the show, that RJ was like, "Has anyone ever told you that you look like Baker Mayfield?" And I just said, "No, not at all." But you stare at me hard enough, I think you can maybe see it, especially when I have like the off season beard of neglect, going on. So I can kind of see it, but I've gotten like other people, like Stephen Amell has been one. I don't necessarily agree with these because these are all like extremely handsome people, and I just don't feel comfortable when people are like, "Oh, you kind of look like this person." Like I want to say, literally 2 weeks ago, someone said I look like Kevin Love. That was a new one.
Okay.
But I mean, at what point are you just naming people that are brunette and have a beard?
Right.
Like, are you just feeding me the first person that pops into your head? So anyway, the Baker Mayfield thing kind of became a running joke because every time I'd be on the show, RJ would just say something about it, and I have to go, "Yeah, RJ, it was funny the first 50 times, but whatever. I appreciate your candor here." But anyway, that's all really that is. It's nothing too complicated. But as far as the best thing I've done over, like, I guess the off season or our summer break as football people, I can't say I've taken like any real vacation, but what I have done is I started renovating my basement. And right now I'm in an office that is going to be a nursery. So congrats to me. If anyone doesn't know, I've got my firstborn on the way in November. Thank you very much. It is a time to be alive. But then my office is going to turn into the basement, which will have like the gym and the better entertainment area of the house. So mainly I'm just super excited about that. It's not like a vacation. I'm doing all the work, but it is fun to know what's going to be on the other side once I'm done. So it's a little bit of a cop-out answer, but that's probably what I'd say.
Plus, I mean, at this point, I think you're trying to build up energy for November, right? You're going to need it.
Yeah.
Let's not take a vacation and then, just be tired by the time November rolls on. I think you're going to need all of it.
Yeah, I know. It sounds like it. I think I'm going to visit my sister in Chicago like the weekend right before the season starts, which will be fun. We're going to call that like our little baby moon if anyone's into that
Nice.
term. But other than that, yeah, it's just been relaxing, getting the basement done, just enjoying the dead period before what
Yes.
is going to rev up and kind of be our lives for the next however many months.
Yeah, and speaking of revving up, we had some news rev up over the
Yes, we
weekend on
did.
Sunday. Most notably, let's start with DeAndre Hopkins choosing to the Tennessee Titans. I don't believe it's signed official, but has agreed to a
Mhm.
2-year, $26 million deal worth up to $32 million. I think everyone's reaction to this, Michael, was just kind of like, huh, that's kind of weird. Can you make some sense of this, or were you kind of in that same boat of like, that is not the matching I was expecting?
So funny enough, the exact thing you did was my reaction. I
Yeah.
think I saw it and it kind of just like scrolled across my phone and that was my thought. I said, "Huh. I know he visited the Titans,
Right.
but that just seemed like well, I'm going to entertain pretty much every team that wants to entertain me because I'm a veteran. I want to go to the right place, maybe I get a free dinner out of it, what have you." But then he chose the Titans and you're going, "Okay, like this feels like a much better thing for the Titans
Sure.
themselves than it is for DeAndre Hopkins in terms of what you'd normally think he'd be motivated by, right? It's improving on his numbers, continuing to climb up the leaderboards at his position, potentially win a championship. You want to always think that is at the forefront of his mind. But he goes to the Titans, and well, the Titans. If you saw that really funny graphic this morning, I think it was on Good Morning Football or NFL Network, but it was the career leaders in touchdown receptions on like the roster essentially for the Titans. Well, if you also counted Mike Vrabel, their head coach, Mike Vrabel led the Titans, or currently leads the Titans in career receiving touchdowns with 12, and that all came when he was playing as a linebacker for the Patriots. So, like, if that doesn't tell you anything about their situation, they needed a DeAndre Hopkins. So he comes over and he's a veteran. He's well proven. I think it's a good fit if he just wants to be the guy. He's gonna get the ball. He's flat out is. We'll see what Traylon Burks looks like. Their second year player only had one touchdown last year, played through some injuries, but the guy's still good. He had his fifth best yards per game average a year ago. He had his fourth best catch rate a year ago as well. He's on the wrong side of 30, but at the end of the day, he still had 717 yards in 9 games, 64 receptions. The one thing I will say, though, his 7.5 yards per target clip was second worst in his career. So you do kind of see the physical limitations and stuff that comes with, he was never an elite athlete, but he still just has the nuance for the game. He still has great hands. He's going to be successful, but it will be interesting to see what he does in an offense that combined for less than 3,000 yards passing between Tannehill and Josh Dobbs a season ago. Malik Willis, obviously we're kind of a little out on him with Will Levis being drafted. So it's just a lot up in the air. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you wanted the best place for him, but at the end of the day, you can kind of connect those dots.
Yeah, there's a couple things that are interesting about that. Like, part of me is like, okay, well, maybe Tennessee had such poor passing numbers over the years because they lacked a DeAndre Hopkins. And what can it look like with a DeAndre Hopkins? Obviously, they had AJ Brown, and I think a lot of people also wonder why they didn't just pay AJ Brown than rather paying DeAndre Hopkins. But the other thing is, like, this feels like one of those weird ends to a player's career where you almost forget that they were on that team. 10 years down the line, you're like, oh yeah, DeAndre Hopkins was a Titan for a year or two, and he had like a weird number, and I don't know. It's an odd choice for him. I also think it's kind of odd for the Titans because obviously, like, their receiving core was bad, probably one of the worst in the league. He immediately vaults to wide receiver 1, and they needed that. But I guess my overall follow-up question would be, to what end? What are the Tennessee Titans trying to do this year and next? Do they think they're legitimate Super Bowl contenders? Does this make them? Does this put them in the conversation? I don't think it does. I mean, they still have a long ways to go, I think, across the board when it comes to their roster. Obviously this makes them significantly better. And the AFC South is, I would say they're for the taking. Jacksonville's a team that's on the rise, obviously, and probably considered favorites right now. But I just don't think this is, I mean, you add a 30-year-old receiver to put you over the top. I don't know if they were a team that were a DeAndre Hopkins away from going over the top.
Yeah, I have to agree. You mentioned like a signing like this normally for a team is to show that they want to compete and it's a get over the hump move. Well,
Right.
when you look at their receiving core, did Hopkins adding him simply get them to the hump? or
Right.
closer to the hump.
Right.
Because I don't think anyone seriously can say this puts the Titans receiving core over the hump. They're going to do some damage. We're really excited about this group. And I think you can be somewhat excited because they do have Treylon Burks, who was, a size speed athlete at the position. A lot of hype for him. You add in a complementary piece like Hopkins, who is more of a possession receiver, big play receiver, phenomenal hands, obviously. But then what else do you have besides that? Yes, of course, Derrick Henry. You're going to run the heck out of the ball. But Vrabel wants to be, you would like to think, a balanced offense, just be able to throw when they need to, be able to run it when they need to. But no, I just cannot say that this is a move that makes you go, the Titans are in it. They are now among the teams that everyone has to talk about when they say playoff contenders or anything like that. They just simply aren't. We'll see. So it is an interesting move, but like you said, I just can't see it as of right now.
And from Hopkins' point of view, I mean, I guess it's two things, right? It's the opportunity, it's being the guy like you mentioned, and it's the money, right? Mm-hmm. The Patriots were I think the other team that was kind of heavily in the mix there, and I think there are reports out there that the Patriots deal was nowhere in the ballpark of this one. Were you surprised to see him get $13 million a year? Is that a figure that seems worth? Or I mean, honestly, I think personally it's relatively fair deal. Like, this is a guy who probably still has the best hands in the league. He might not have all the physical tools he used to, and he might be more of a intermediate guy rather than your deep shot guy. But were you surprised maybe it wasn't a little bit more, maybe even a little bit less?
I think in the end, I feel like it's probably right where it needed to be.
Yeah.
We know the talent's there,
yeah.
right? We see it every day when he's actually on the field. But if you do look at his past two seasons, I think he has roughly between 1,200 and 1,300 yards combined over the last two seasons. He's missed games due to injury. He missed games. He had the 6-game suspension to start this past season. So his numbers obviously took a hit, but you still have to keep those things in mind. Right. He's apparently in a phase of his career, though, where he's going through the injuries and the suspension. So it's like you can't just assume he's going to be on the field for every single game. It's just not that time, that era of his career. So I think the money is correct. You paid him like someone who's going to make an impact on your team, but you're not breaking the bank for him because, like you said, he's in that time where it's the end of his career. He's on random teams all of a sudden. Like, he joined the Titans and I go, oh, he's going to go the way of Julio, where Julio spends a year with the Titans and then he spends a year with the Bucs. And then you forget that he's even in the NFL, which is very unfortunate for a guy like Julio. And you don't want to see something like that happen to a DeAndre Hopkins, but it just kind of seems to be where things are headed.
Last thing before we move on to our next topic, back when he was kind of on the trade block, Hopkins outlined 3 things that he wanted in his new team. He wanted a quarterback who loves the game. He wanted a great defense, and he wanted stable management upstairs. How many of those 3 do you think he got?
I think depending if you have a conversation with Ryan Tannehill, Will Levis, whoever's going to be throwing the ball, I think he might have all 3, or at least you have an argument for all 3.
Sure.
He didn't say he wanted like one of the best quarterbacks. He literally just said, do you love the game of football? I think you can probably check that off. Good defense. Well, they just gave Jeffrey Simmons a ton of money. They have good players on that defense. And we've seen Mike Vrabel get more out of players that may not be so named like brand name players, right? So I think you can make a debate there. And then I think the Titans have been a well organized organization and have good guys at the top making these decisions. So I think he probably nailed some of those things. It's just, I don't know. It just feels like all those parts put together, the sum isn't as great as you would expect for the situation that Hopkins would maybe want for. Yeah, he checked the boxes, but like how big were the boxes in the first place?
Right. And I think and I think when you think of all 3 of those categories, when you think of like a quarterback who loves the game, is Ryan Tannehill the first one that comes to your mind? Probably not. Is a great defense in this league, are the Titans up there? I mean, kind of like you said, Vrabel's a good leader of a good defense. They weren't great last year, but they keeping Jeffrey Simmons around is obviously a huge part of that. And then when you think of solid organizations, I got no qualms with how the Titans run things, but they're also not one of those guys that kind of jump to your mind at the top of the list. So like, I'm with you. He probably got all 3, but it's just not the prototype, I guess, of all 3. But let's move on to the next category, because today is the franchise tag deadline to sign a long-term deal. So everyone who was given the franchise tag has until 4 p.m. today, Monday, July 17th, to sign a long-term deal. If they don't get it done, they'll probably sit on that franchise tag or get traded or sit out the season if things get dramatically bad. So we saw the first movement of this happen also, I believe, over the weekend. Evan Ingram and the Jaguars agreed to a 3-year, $41.25 million deal, 24 million of that guaranteed, basically a 2-year extension from him. What are your thoughts on that overall deal?
I thought it was a good deal. I thought they're getting a guy under wraps, at least for the next few seasons, that is kind of hitting his peak as a player. It took him a little bit because he definitely was like the ideal flex tight end, maybe a little bit shorter. I mean, I think he's like a true 6'3", maybe just over 240 pounds, if not maybe even under. He is a slender guy. So he's not going to be like your all around George Kittle, Travis Kelce, what have you, but he made an impact in this offense. He had career highs in both receptions and receiving yards with 73 and 766 respectively. His 4 touchdowns were the second most in his career. And I want to say, I just looked at it before the show, that his 74.5% catch rate was first in his career. So, I mean, the guy is living his best life with the Jaguars. And it seems like, their quick turnaround under Doug Peterson really stemmed from Doug going out and getting guys that he knew that can come in and be a part of the team he wanted to create. I mean, were they the greatest names in the world? No. Like, people probably laughed at the Christian Kirk deal initially because they thought that was a lot of money for a guy who'd been between a wide receiver 2, 3 on his previous team in the Cardinals. But then he comes out and Christian Kirk has a great year. Evan Ingram has a great year. I mean, whatever cocktail they made with all the different pieces of the Jaguars, it worked out this past season, and Ingram was a big part of that. It was also the first year that he played 17 career games, and I believe we've only been playing 17 regular season games the last 2 seasons, but that's also good to see, right? There's just all these things that are peaking for Evan Ingram, and so I don't think it's outlandish that the Jaguars said, you know what, let's like keep him with us through this peak and then kind of deal with it later. And it sounds like there's a ripcord or something that it can have him hit the market at 31, and then we'll see where he goes from there.
Yeah, no, I think I'm right there with you again. Evan Ingram probably isn't the first guy you think of when you think of top tight ends in this league, but his production is getting there, right? And the Jaguars found a mix. And a lot of times I think we're too eager to call guys busts or not good players just because they're not fits with the guy, the teams that draft him. And he had a productive 5 years in New York. It's not like he was a bad player in New York, but he didn't, I think, reach maybe the expectation for him there. And then you fit him within an offensive, a good quarterback, a good coach, ways that, a person who finds ways to use them, and suddenly you're one of the more productive tight ends in the league, and he's getting paid like it. 13.75 million in a year puts him about 6 between Mark Andrews and David Njoku, which feels just about right for him. Honestly, that feels like a good spot for him. And he's still not, I mean, he's entering year 7 of his career. And that might sound like an old age. He's 28, but tight ends are one of those positions where I think you can play to your mid 30s really. And it's not like this was an outlandish deal. It's 3 years. It's not breaking the bank. It's not devoting long-term. And like I said, like, it's really kind of a manufactured 2-year deal. It's there's an easy way for them to get out. It seems like a healthy deal, and you're doing right by your players, right? Franchise tag is always one of the most polarizing things, and so I think just coming to a long-term deal buys you some goodwill in the locker room, buys you some goodwill from Ingram himself, and you're going to get the best version of him this year because you went out and made that deal. So smart deal for them. Let's move on to the other guys who have the deadline this, again, 4 p.m. on Monday, have not come to long-term agreements yet. First, we have Cowboys running back Tony Pollard, who did sign his franchise tag, which likely means they're probably not going to be pushing a long-term deal. There's also Saquon Barkley of the Giants and Josh Jacobs. Maybe noticing a pattern here, all running backs. So let's start there. Is this just the future of the running backs? We're just going to franchise tag these guys because we're too afraid from the horrible history of second contracts with these running backs. Is this the new normal here?
I unfortunately think it is, and that's just so unfortunate. I'm a big fan of the position. I've always been a big offensive line guy, so like by proxy, running backs kind of come with it in terms of, like, when you run the ball really well, that's just like an example of being able to see your offensive line dominate and be the type of, group that you want them to be. So at the same time, like, if running backs become more expensive and popular, then I think it just kind of brings more love to the trenches as well. Just because when a quarterback's doing well, all eyes are on the quarterback. If running backs are doing well, you kind of also look at the offensive line and go, yeah, this group's awesome. And it gives the big guys love. So I do like to kind of see all that. But unfortunately, yes, I do. I just think that's what it is. It just like the zero running back thing went to, fantasy was a big thing. And then now in real life football, there's just not a lot of love. It's weird to think that a player can have an elite season by their positional standards, 1,500 yards rushing, 500-ish yards receiving, 15 touchdowns. And then it's like, all right, time to pay the guy. and they're like, ew, running back? Gross.
Right.
And then they just give him like a deal that's nowhere close, right? Like obviously, as someone who covers the Chargers, we're dealing with the Austin Eckler situation, and even after getting a little bit more money, I think he's making after his incentives that are like guaranteed for him to hit pretty much just by the standards. He'll make I think a little over 8 or 8 on the dot, but he's still kind of voicing some displeasure with his situation, and I don't blame him for feeling like he's the guy in the spotlight right now to show that, or that he has a chance to show that the running back position is being undervalued. He's pushing for his position and his fellow peers, and I think that's admirable. 10.1 million for Tony Pollard on the tag, I think is really good for a running back who just kind of had his sort of breakout year. And it wasn't even as the running back one. It was as, someone in a tandem. And now he's going to be the guy. And I think 10.1 is probably good for a guy for what he's done and what they think he's going to do. Interesting enough, I saw a tweet from Jane Slater just before the show that said she heard there wasn't any extensive discussion regarding a long-term deal pretty much at all between the sides through the past few months. They're happy with where it is. They're happy to deal with whatever comes with after the season. I want to think that if he balls out and has the season I think a lot of people have predicted for him, he'll make more money, good money somewhere else. It may not be crazy, but I think Pollard will be fine.
Yeah, this is a really tough situation for the running backs, and shout out to all the running backs that are standing up and trying to get that long-term deal or speaking out. But at the same time, like as someone who follows all this sort of stuff closely and following the Lions, there's been a lot of talk about positional value when it comes. I mean, they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs 12th overall. They gave David Montgomery a pretty significant deal, and I've generally sided on the general manager's side where it's like, yeah, I wouldn't shell out a ton of money for this position because in large, a lot of their production is based off of your offensive line. In large, we've seen late round picks and undrafted guys come in and fill the role at an admirable level. At the same time, though, like I always want to side with the players with things like this, right? You never really want to side with the big wigs, and these guys are. I mean, it's one of the most grueling positions in football, right? Like you are putting your body on the line, whether you're even getting the ball in your hands or not. Like you're pass protecting, you're blocking, you're running. It's a thankless job in a lot of ways, and it seems like it's becoming even more and more thankless. So I don't know how this tailspin ends, right? Like how do you get NFL general managers to suddenly believe that the running back position is more valuable than you're making it? Because it feels like these trends just kind of continue to go in that direction unless unless NFL offenses change, right? It's a passing league too, right? And so I think maybe the way out of this is a trend towards more receiving backs, right? It's what the Lions are using to kind of justify the Jahmyr Gibbs pick. If you have guys like him, Saquon is obviously included in that group. Christian McCaffrey, those backs, Alvin Kamara, Eckler as well. Like those are the kind of backs that might see a resurgence in salaries, but I don't know. I don't know if there really is a way out of this. And it is unfortunate because these guys, they used to be the faces of the franchise, right? Like you look at some of the most storied players in this league's history, a lot of them are running backs, and they're still producing amazing plays and highlights, and we'll all profit off that. But for some reason, we're leaving the running backs in the cold here. And so I don't know. Do you have an idea of whether this tailspin will ever end, or will it change? I guess will it take a drastic shift in NFL strategy, offensive strategy, for that to happen?
I think the best answer, the short answer, is probably what you just said, which is like a dramatic shift in just the NFL landscape to push teams in that direction, because we've just seen that seems to be what spurs on any sort of change. It's just someone does something different, really cool, and everyone goes, oh, that's awesome, let's give it a shot. So like as you were kind of talking about, you said that the best names, a lot of the best players ever play the running back position, and I've brought that up several times in other conversations where I'm like, would you look at a Barry Sanders, a Walter Payton, look at those guys in the face in their prime of their careers and say, dude, I'm so sorry, like you're on the path to be the greatest ever? It's just like, you play running back. Like we're just, we can't. What do you mean 10 straight 1,000-yard seasons? I mean, like, yeah, but what have you done for me lately? I mean, like, this is the type of stuff that just doesn't make a lot of sense. When you think about Hall of Fame, NFL Mount Rushmores for teams, franchises, what have you, there's a running back usually on that team. For the Chargers, you have LaDainian Tomlinson, right? You have Walter Payton for the Bears, Barry Sanders for the Lions. I mean, you just have, they're right there. You can't tell the story of the NFL and a lot of these franchises without mentioning one of the greatest running backs of all time. So to think that the same position, people of the NFL and everyone who runs it is looking at this position going, like, and what's killer though is like when a 7th rounder comes into the league as a running back, right, and does super well, that's amazing. That's a great story. Right. It's awesome. But that adds to this, the theme of that, like, expensive running backs and top tier running backs aren't worth it because, Joe Schmo over here from, Utah State Tech comes in and rushes for 950 yards as a tandem back. And then people are like, well, we'll just stick with him. Right. Like, you love to see it. But unfortunately, that's just part of what's kind of killing this unfortunate narrative.
Yeah, it's good for the player, good for the story, and somehow bad for the position, which seems counterintuitive. But
they can't win.
Yeah, they can't win. That's exactly right. So of these guys, like I said, it doesn't sound like Tony Pollard is necessarily even interested in signing an extension. But do you think anything gets done between Saquon and Josh Jacobs, or are they kind of doomed to really suffer this running back curse?
This is tough because, I mean, either one could happen. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, that's the NFL. Like, I just kind of respect it. With Barkley, the resurgence he had and what that did for the team, obviously going to the playoffs, winning a playoff game. I could see the Giants convincing themselves to make sure something gets done with Barkley, usually because of, again, that, like, what have you done for me lately mindset? Well, look what he did for the team, what he helped them accomplish a year ago. I think is great. But the thing with Jacobs is, he plays on not a long-term deal in 2022. He has a career year. He's the first, I think, rushing leader for the Raiders since Marcus Allen in like 85, 86, something like that. But they didn't make the playoffs, and they had like, a really lackluster year after the whole AFC West was supposed to be really good. Yeah. So then you could easily see the Raiders going, well, like, you just saw what comes with you having a great season, and like the rest of the team didn't have a great season, and we ended up, not winning that many games. So then you could see them potentially going away from that. So I really don't know. The identity of the Raiders used to be this run heavy offense, run first type of style. But it just hasn't, and it was that, but then you just saw the rest of the team falter, and they're going to go, well, like, we can't just win by running Josh Jacobs. We need to put money and build the rest of the team because we just saw all these shortcomings we have a year ago. So I could see something probably not getting done there.
Yeah, I think of the two, I would probably put Saquon as the most likely as well. And part of it is what I was just talking about earlier, is he brings kind of that balance of running and receiving. Not to, I mean, Josh Jacobs, I just looked up his stats, and I was actually kind of surprised to see he's back-to-back 50-yard reception season. So he's no slouch in that category either, but maybe not necessarily on the same level that Saquon can and has in the past. And I think the biggest thing with Saquon is he proved he can stay healthy, right? That was, I think, the biggest question mark going into 2022. It's like, okay, yeah, you're a great back, but how can I rely on you being on the field? Plays full 16 games last season. I guess not full, a close to full 16 game season. And like you said, just, better team results overall. And because their identity, like you said, kind of surrounds Saquon Barkley in that run game. That's how you kind of unlock Daniel Jones. Really, like, if you take Saquon Barkley out of that offense, how efficient is Daniel Jones going to be? And you just paid him quite a bit of money. So I would be surprised if they have confidence that, we'll ride out Saquon for a year and then figure it out after that, when you just made a heavy investment in your quarterback, which has undoubtedly benefited highly from Saquon's appearance. All right, let's move on to our next topic here. One I'm not all that eager to talk about, and it's the New York Jets being featured on Hard Knocks. The NFL finally made up their minds when it felt like this was kind of the destined choice from the beginning, which means more Aaron Rodgers on your TV, more New York market being all up in your face. Michael, first of all, are you a Hard Knocks guy, or have you kind of been tired of that franchise for a while now?
So I can't ever say I was ever a huge Hard Knocks guy. I think I watched a little when the Browns were on back when some years, and then obviously watched when the Chargers were on Hard Knocks. But I'll always have qualms with that season because it was also split with the Rams, right. And so, like, every team who gets to enjoy their team on Hard Knocks, they love it. Of course, they get all the inside looks and stuff like that. So when the Chargers were on, they like split it. So you only got like half of what every other team ever got when their team was on Hard Knocks. So that was great. I really did enjoy it. I think I saw myself on an episode. I was on Anthony Lynn's laptop. I was a little blur, but I knew it was me. So that was really cool to make my own debut on HBO. But other than that, like, there's a lot of stuff lately. It used to be so cool to see behind the scenes stuff, but there's like a lot more now. Quarterback obviously just came out, and there's just a lot, like each team actually does their own series. I know the Chargers do one called All In, where they do essentially the Hard Knocks thing just by themselves, so I would say the mystique and what's made Hard Knocks really, really cool and unique, it's not as isolated anymore, right? Every team does their own thing, but Liev Schreiber is still Liev Schreiber. And there was the quote from Rodgers that was like, I'm just, Hard Knocks will be whatever. We'll get through it. But he called Liev Schreiber the voice of God. And you just kind of love to see that respect for like someone else in a completely different area of work. And like Liev's just so cool. So I am excited to possibly watch a little bit. What I think is going to be really interesting is just the dichotomy between Rodgers and Wilson, like the contrast between the two, because they're like, I would assume, very different people.
Right.
So seeing them work together and Wilson doing the whole, like, I'm going to make the other quarterback's life hell stuff, and Rodgers being like, no, you're not. But like, I just think it's going to be really interesting to see those two together. And that's probably what I'm most interested about.
Yeah. As someone who was also on Hard Knocks, shout out to the HBO crew last year, fitting me in next to Penei Sewell, making me look like a very small human being. I've been a pretty big fan of the series from the get-go. And I think what you said is very much true, in that, like, because there's so much behind the scenes content now, whether it's internal or external, it has diluted the show a little bit. I mean, it's hard for that show to keep up with the fast-paced nature of news these days, where it's just like, oh, you're covering this guy getting cut now, that happened 10 days ago, right? And it's not their fault, obviously. They can only do so much in terms of a weekly turnaround. But it eliminates some of the excitement. Like, you'll see people tweet out like, Hard Knocks spoiler, this guy got released, and you're like, oh well, I wanted to watch that on the show. Like, and so that takes away from it. But I still think, amongst all sports, NFL films reign supreme. Like, they do such a good job with everything they do. They're funny. They Liev Schreiber, like it says, is amazing. They're not afraid to show some things that are, I mean, some of the most iconic moments, behind the scenes moments, have come from Hard Knocks, whether it's, Rex Ryan talking about eating snacks, or all of us watching, certain people. I mean, we watched the Antonio Brown thing kind of unfold on the Raiders Hard Knocks a couple years ago too. So, you hope maybe there's some sort of big incident like that. Some sort of drama thing. And listen, it's Aaron Rodgers. There could be something dramatic that happens in the fold. But at the same time, I was thrilled that Aaron Rodgers left the division so that I no longer have to talk to him. And of course, he goes to one of the biggest markets in the country, and now he's on Hard Knocks, and it's like, I can't escape this man. I have to see clips of him on Pat McAfee every week, and now I'm gonna have to see him every week on Hard Knocks. And so it's just, it feels a little played out. Here's the thing though, like, I am a sucker. I'm a hypocrite. I'm going to watch. I live for the drama, even though I say I don't want it. Part of me still wants it, and so I'm still going to watch when I get the opportunities. Obviously, training camp is kind of a busy time for all of us. Much easier to consume it when they're covering the team you're covering. But I don't know. I think I'm still going to watch. So are you in that boat, or you're gonna? You just watch the clips as they come on social media?
I'll pay attention. I think it would be fun to watch. So besides, the Rodgers and Wilson stuff, I think Salah's just like a great dude, and I think he's going to win a lot of fans. I think you're just going to see him in like his natural habitat. I bet they have him on a scene just getting it going in the weight room. Oh, he's just ripped out of his mind. He's doing something super impressive. Everyone's going to be like, I like the Jets now. Like, there's just going to be some fans who are like going to follow the Jets because of like whatever Salah does in this show, which I think is great. And he deserves all of that because he's a phenomenal guy. But yeah, no, I will probably never sit down and go, I'm going to watch Hard Knocks over everything else I could be doing at this time, but I will watch some clips. I'll find the viral moments and just go from there.
Yeah. That's kind of an underrated part of Hard Knocks too, is like highlighting the head coach. Obviously last year with the Lions, they kind of highlighted the entire coaching staff. And I think that phenomenon that you just explained, a lot of people became Lions fans, became Dan Campbell fans after seeing him. Robert Saleh, same coaching carousel year, a guy that almost, was hired by the Lions. And so I think Lions fans might be interested if they're sickened by Aaron Rodgers. I think maybe Robert Saleh may pull him in. He's also a Detroit native too. So interesting storyline there. But let's move on to what will be our final topic, and we'll kind of have a long discussion here because we commonly talk about the worst to first candidates because that sort of thing tends to happen every year, and we all like optimism at this time of year and thinking our bad teams will suddenly be good the next year. What we don't talk about as often, partially because I don't think it happens quite as often, is the first to worst candidates, the teams that finish first last year and now may finish last in their respective divisions. So let's go down maybe our biggest maybe rank them 1 to 4 ish, because I think there's some teams on here where we're not even going to be considering falling down to worst. So let me go through all 8 teams that are eligible here, and then I'll throw it to you in terms of maybe your fourth most likely candidate to go first to worst. So in the AFC, we have Bills, Bengals, Jaguars, Chiefs, Eagles, and then in the NFC, Eagles, Vikings, Bucks, 49ers. Let's eliminate 4 of these teams that we're not even considering. So I imagine Chiefs, we can just throw them out.
Yeah, Chiefs. I mean, I always say this is the Chiefs division until someone takes it from them. And as it stands, sure doesn't seem that way. Knock Chiefs off.
Fair to say the Bengals are probably also off your list.
So I would put them before the Bills. I have Bills just based on strength of division. Yep. Like it just kind of makes more sense that if the Bengals slip kind of at all and these other teams produce the way they kind of look like they can,
sure,
that might be a little murky. I would probably do so. I would knock off Bills because I still think that they are in a pretty good spot revolving their division.
I would say that division's kind of tricky though. Like, sure, I don't know if the Patriots are going to jump everyone, but like obviously we just talked about the Jets. They're a team that could take a jump from, not a horrible season, 7-10 last year. And then the Dolphins are a 2 away from either being a great team or a bad one.
I think that's very fair. I think when you remind me of Aaron Rodgers, obviously we just talked about him. Yeah, sure. I think that all of a sudden puts the AFC East in like the same murkiness that I would consider like the AFC North. So sure, I think the Chiefs for sure. Why don't you make the decision of Bengals or Bills, and we'll go from there.
All right, let's take out. You know what? We've been hating on the Bills a lot in this podcast of late. We're going to give them a week of. We'll spare them for a week. Okay. The Bills are not on our top 4 candidates of first to worst.
Okay, and for NFC, mine would be 49ers, Eagles. I think they've got probably the strongest. Not so much like, the Cowboys are still, in the division with the Eagles, but the Eagles also just seem that good. And then the other 2 teams, Bucks, Vikings, very much are like the 2 up there for them. Yes. So Eagles, Niners, call it a day with them. Okay.
All right. So our remaining 4 candidates now are Bengals, Jaguars, Vikings, and Buccaneers. And I think we already talked our way into probably naming the Bengals as the fourth most likely, I guess, at this point. To go worst to first to worst. Sorry.
Yeah. I'd say so. Yeah. I mean, this defense, like the offense is going to be good. I think this is a defense that they've gotten a lot out of their players without them being some of the best at their positions, or at least normally these name brand players. And like, there's just a chance I see of that defense, like kind of coming back down after a good year or 2. That would leave me to think that they could come back a little bit. But I think out of those 4, the Bengals are probably least likely, to go from first to worst.
Yeah, and like you said, I think the AFC North is just a fascinating division year in and year out, and it feels like there's always at least 3 contenders in that division. I think the Steelers we've mentioned it a couple times on the show, like they're a candidate to take a big jump this year. Obviously a lot depends on their quarterback situation and how big of a year 2 jump he can make, but no matter what, they're going to be a 500 team because Mike Tomlin is there. Like it doesn't matter what else is happening with that roster. They're going to be a competitive football team. They're going to take the Bengals to the fourth quarter pretty much every time they match up. And it just feels like there's a lot of teams beating up on each other in that division, and that could keep things close. But I don't know how you can expect the Bengals to take a significant step back at this point, that would require them to fall to last place in that division, because Joe Burrow is still the second best quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. So that alone, it would take an injury to him. And sorry, Bengals fans are even throwing that into the aura here. But if anything short of that happens, like I think this is still a top, at the very least, 2 team in that division.
Yep, I absolutely agree. So if we just say Bengals off, Jaguars then seems to be our team for the AFC.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's tough because I don't even like having them on this list at all either, because I think they're, if we were ranking these straight 1 to 8, they might be 6, right? In terms of most likely to go first to worst, because I don't know, it seems like they've quickly gotten things together. That they've always had a decent roster, and now that they have Doug Peterson leading and a quarterback that has a good coaching staff around him, they're only going to get better. And they were one of the most fun teams to watch last season. They obviously go out and win a playoff game at home, probably when they should have lost, but at the same time, sorry, didn't mean to do that to you. But at the same time, like, it feels like that was just the beginning for them. Feels like they are very much on the rise. They are very much figuring things out. And it's no offense, but I'm not in love with that division either. I think there's just, I don't know. There's a lot to still figure out with that division, and I don't have a team that I think is. I mean, obviously the Chiefs, but I mean, the Raiders and the Broncos. They went through a lot of changes this offseason. I don't know if Sean Payton is going to turn things around in year one of Denver. The Raiders, to me, are a team that at least is going to take a year or two to rebound from the Derek Carr era. So, I could see the chart. I'm sorry, I'm getting my divisions mixed up here. I was thinking of the Chargers. The Titans are a team that we just talked a bunch about. I don't see them as huge contenders. The Colts, very much still figuring things out. And I like what the Texans are doing, but again, a team that is years away, I think, from really being a good contender. So I don't know. I just think this is Jacksonville's division for the next 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I think you set the stage for the Jaguars to, I mean, really realistically on paper, what we see with our eyes, like this team looks good. Yeah. They're kind of just like a victim of the Bengals, Bills, and Chiefs just being so far ahead of them in terms of like divisional dominance, right, that they are going to be the one that we do say is probably the highest chance to do this, but also they're still, when it comes to Jaguars, they could, because we don't know what's going to happen this season, they could easily be a team that was really good this one teams, and then all of a sudden really take a step back. Maybe they barely push for 500, if not even fall under. I don't necessarily think that's going to happen because, as you said, this division is just not that strong underneath the Jaguars. So like their floor is just going to be that much higher because they should, for the most part, sweep the majority of their division, and then that sets their win column, pretty high already, and they take care of business elsewhere, and they're probably good in the playoffs again. So it's probably, they're probably not going to take a step back, a big one, but could they take a step back? Yeah, but that doesn't mean that they're also still not going to win the division, because that's just where the state of the division is right now. But yeah, I mean, let's go over to the NFC with Bucks and Vikings. You are an NFC North guy. How do we feel about the Vikings this year?
I've said it for the past 4 or 5 months. I think they are a legitimate candidate to go last in the division. I think, I mean, you look around, right? The Packers, for some reason, people think like they are just going to carpet bomb after losing Aaron Rodgers. Like, Aaron Rodgers wasn't the key to that team last year's season. Obviously, he was coming off back-to-back MVP honors. I don't want to discount him, but like that, it was more of an Aaron Jones-led offense than it was an Aaron Rodgers-led offense. So I think they're still going to be pretty competitive. They've got a good defense as well. It's not. I still think it's a very competitive roster. And then you look at the Bears. Obviously, they're a team that Justin Fields could take a big year 2 jump. They spent a lot of offseason resources on getting a more full roster on both sides of the ball. And then the Lions obviously are a team that's considered NFC North favorites right now. And so you look at the Vikings and what did they do this offseason? Like, they just got continually worse on both sides of the ball. They lost significant members, whether it's Adam Thielen and Dalvin Cook. On offense, they lost a couple of key defensive players as well. And you look at that record last year and you're just like, how did that happen? How was this team 13-4 when they were 10-0, I think, in 1-score games, right? That just can't happen again. And I understand you have Justin Jefferson and Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback, but that is only going to get you so far. And it barely got them as far as they did last year. And what did that result in? A quick first round exit in the playoffs. So if I had to predict the NFC North right now, I would actually have the Vikings last. And I don't feel bad about that. I honestly think that's what's going to happen. But when you have a team like the Bears that I think their range of possibilities could be anywhere from like a 10-win team to a 4-win team. You never really know, but to me, I just think the Vikings are a team that's headed for a rude awakening, and I think Vikings fans even know it at this point.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think you could easily say the spectrum that the Vikings could land on are second in the division behind the Lions, to last. Like I would listen to an argument that said Vikings could win the division again, because as long as the chance isn't zero, I'll listen to it, but it doesn't mean it's super likely. I think if the Lions, let's put it this way, if the Lions do what they should do, whatever that is, subjective, I get it, they should win the division and feel pretty good about it. If the Vikings get the most out of their stars, if this retooling defense plays above themselves, yes, I can see them finish second in the division. But with the Packers, if you are correct that this is, if you don't think that Aaron Rodgers was really the pivotal thing for the Packers, and it's Aaron Jones led and LaFleur still works his magic offensively, if that defense, which does have a lot of talent, continues to get better, they could push for a second. The Bears, as you said, I think they go the way that Fields does. I think Fields is way too talented to continue kind of being on a lower tier. Like, how long can he be a quarterback that everyone goes, this dude is talented, he just needs to put it together? How long can that be the sentiment until we move on from it? And he's just unfortunately another quarterback who isn't getting the job done in Chicago. So then if things bounce the right way for the Bears and Packers, yes, the Vikings could easily be first place. I could honestly see this be a division, where none of them have like a really bad record, but like the Vikings could be fourth with a, what would that be, 7-10 record, 8-9, around there, where like they're all kind of middling. They kind of beat up each other in the division games and they do fairly well outside. But then like the Lions maybe win it with 11 or 12 wins if they put it all together. And the Packers or whomever could be at 9 wins. And then it's like 8-7. Yep. So we've seen that before. So that's probably how I would view the NFC North kind of rounding out. I think no one's like awful, but they kind of keep each other from really breaking through to like a higher tier of the NFL.
Yeah, I think that's a smart way to overlook the NFC North. Let's move to the NFC South. The Buccaneers finished first, obviously, last year, just barely, with a thrilling record of 8-9. And so I guess what's your outlook for this division in general? Because to me, it's almost like pick a name out of a hat. And so, yeah, I think the Bucs are definitely a prime candidate to go first to worst. But so I could literally see any of these 4 teams finishing last.
Yeah, I mean, when you go from Tom Brady to me throwing the football, then you're in for a rude awakening, Bucs fans. I'll tell you what, I'm sore right now just walking around the house. So anyway, jokes aside, you're still going to Baker Mayfield, who showed some life with the Rams a year ago, but like, how much is that? How much do we feel like is that going to transfer? Like, history tells us a lot of things. What does history tell us? Is this more likely? Is he going to ball out? Is he going to lead them to a bunch of wins? Or is he going to be like fine enough to retain the starting job, but he'll throw probably too many interceptions where like he's doing well, but then he takes a step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, what have you. It'll be interesting. He's got good players to throw it to. I think they've got still a good nucleus around the rest of the team for them to build around. If they just get adequate play from the quarterback, I think they might be pretty fine. But you look at the rest of the division, obviously we've got Bryce Young with the Panthers, Derek Carr with the Saints. Like, there's some new faces. There are a lot of new faces in that division. And I would like to think it's up for grabs as well. Similar to, we kind of talked about the AFC North, just like everyone's going to be competitive. Who knows what madness we'll see. This is similar to that division, but like, I would say the quality of football is just not as strong. Like, it'll be competitive within their little 4-group team, where they will fight each other. But the thing is, there's a chance like 3 of them end up with a record less than 500. I wouldn't be surprised by that. We'll see if the rookie quarterbacks can outshine, the veterans that came over. So like if Young, even competes with Carr in terms of stats by the end of the year, just stuff like that. I think it'll be an interesting division. But I'm not going to like tell you that you should stay strapped to the AFC South or NFC South, all year, because it just might be a tough watch from the jump.
Yeah. And interesting enough, our friends at DraftKings, Tampa Bay Buccaneers are last in terms of divisional odds to win the NFC South at plus 800, pretty significantly below the Panthers, who are plus 400, Falcons are plus 215, and the favorites to win the division are the New Orleans Saints. So yeah, really interesting division, but I think you're right. I think the Buccaneers they've lost too many players, including your quarterback, which is obviously pretty darn pivotal for them to really. I don't know. Are you on the Vikings being more likely to lose? Be last in the division, or do you give that to the Bucs?
That's a great question. I think if I were to make a snap judgment, I have a little bit of a Vikings bias. I am here in Minneapolis. My wife is from here, so like a little bit of that. But also, at the end of the day, when you look at, I think the Bucks core group of players and some recent additions, like that's a much better team to build off of. If you take the jersey off, like the Bucks core is much better in terms of like important positions. They still got good receivers. They've got a really good defensive line, pass rush, athletic linebackers. They've got some good young secondary players. And then you go to the Vikings and you try to match them up and you're like, well, they lose at this position. They lose at this position. They lose there. So honestly, I would say the Vikings, which is just weird because I think they have so much talent at other places. But yeah, I'd probably go Vikings would be more likely to go first to worst.
All right. Before we get out of here, we of course have to bring Rachel Prevet back onto the show. I have 3 questions for you, Rachel. First, who is your first to worst candidate, most likely? 2, what is something awesome you did on your quote unquote summer break? And 3, of course, who is the MFL MVP?
All righty. First of all, before I even do any of that, I have to shout out Michael for, popping on last minute because we couldn't have did the show without you. So shout out to you for just being available for us.
100%.
We love having you on every single time. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I actually went to Cancun, Mexico this summer last weekend. And so it was like a little short weekend trip, Thursday to Monday, but that was like probably, the highlight of my summer so far. So now I'm trying to get back into a routine. Now the training camp is about to start. I'm just like kind of all over the place. But my candidate, I definitely agree with you guys with the Jags. I have the Bucs. When it comes to the NFC, and you guys already touched on the reasons why. Michael, you touched on Tom Brady. It's just a lot for them to prove. And so when looking at just the quarterback situation alone, I'm just not really, really confident in Baker Mayfield. The consistency, the injuries, I just don't see it. And so that's going to be a battle with him and Kyle Trask. But at the end of the day, I just am a little bit more confident in what Michael said as well with the Carolina Panthers, seeing a young, fresh face, a new coaching staff. So that's going to be a new head coach. And so I think I would go with the Bucs when it comes to the NFC. But for today, it was really close. Like you both did a really great job. It really came down to just, you kind of guys agreed on everything.
I know.
Really the news for today and then these 2. But I'm going to give it to Michael for today. So shout out to you.
Well deserved. Came in the last minute, got a baby on board. I'm not going to fight this decision.
Yeah.
So Michael, what are you going to do with your winnings?
I'll just tell you what, I needed this. I'm not going to be humble. Well, I am humble. Thank you guys very much. I really appreciate it. It's always fun to get back to the fundamentals and just work on your game. And, when your moment arises, you don't need luck anymore because you just worked so hard. But after a weekend, we were just at a friend's place with their 3 kids. And for the first 12 hours, that was a great time. And then the rest was I wanted to leave really badly. So to then come here and be able to do this with you guys and make me forget about all of that was fantastic. So I appreciate it with my winnings. Well, I think there's some free snacks at the grocery store. So I'm going to go get those because that's how much my winnings are worth, right? This double FMLV. It's worth more inside, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to hang it on my wall. I think I'm going to print out a little plaque and put it somewhere. But
nice.
Other than that, couldn't be happier. Thank you so much.
Well, Michael, again, I do appreciate you filling in. Hopefully by the end of this, you aren't ready to leave. Hopefully a little bit more entertaining than a child's birthday party. But either way, time to get out of here. Michael, one last question, or one last request to take us out here.
Okay.
Say something nice about RJ. And this might be a challenge.
Well, actually, I already had one kind of locked and loaded just because of our recent Twitter exchange. He was at the San Diego Zoo recently, and so it was a picture of him and his wife and their their young boy. And first off, I saw his kid and I was like, that's RJ. Like, that's just like the look on his face. I was like, he's his father's son. But I saw RJ's fit and I was like, dad fit, just nailed out the gate, dude. He had the bucket hat. He had, I think it was like an off-brand sweat wicking t-shirt.
Okay.
And I think it was probably just gym shorts and then like whatever dad shoes. And I'm just like, this man chose comfort over any sort of style. And you just have to respect it because the San Diego Zoo is no joke. Those big city zoos, man, are expansive. And if it's hot, it's hot. So I was just like, dude, I respect this so much because you look like you're prepared. And that's probably, how do I turn that into a compliment? Good choices to choosing comfort over style and fit and the drip. He had none of it, but boy, was he comfy. So RJ, take that as a compliment. Please don't take that as anything else.
All right. I think that's what's practicality. That's today's lesson.
Yes.